Hector Bravo, unhinged. Chaos is now in session.
Welcome back to our channels, Warriors. We are still growing. Today, another banger for you guys. We have a special guest today, a female former correctional officer. I'm glad we have her on the show because normally it's male-dominated. Even the career field is male-dominated. So it'll be good to hear a perspective from a former CO who started her career in 2002 at Salinas Valley State Prison and would eventually transfer to SATF, Substance Abuse Treatment Facility. So today we have none other than Cynthia. Welcome, Cynthia.
Hi, how are you, Hector? Thank you for having me.
Cool. I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you were able to make that transportation over here. I'm really honored that you were to do that.
You're welcome. Thank you.
So where did you grow up at?
I grew up in Fresno.
That's a good thing. That's a good thing.
And attended Clovis schools. So, you know, there's that like you're from Fresno, but you say you're from Clovis. It's that fine line between upper and kind of a...
Which one's upper?
Clovis is like your La Jolla and your, you know...
I'm glad you let me know about that.
That boundary. And then there's Fresno, which is like one street of a boundary that just...
So did you grow up in Fresno or Clovis?
Both, because I went to Clovis schools all my life, but I grew up in Fresno, which was like one street of a boundary over.
How did you get to the school bus? Or?
Yes.
Was there other people from Fresno that ended up going to
Absolutely,
Clovis?
Because of the boundaries.
Okay.
Yes. So there's always like these little like comments on.
Was there?
Comments on now on Instagram and TikTok, like, you know, people who were raised in Fresno and say they're from Clovis, and so.
Okay, that's funny. It's a thing.
It's
a thing.
But yeah.
Cool. At what time did it dawn on you that you were gonna join corrections?
At a really early age, when I was in high school, I was really interested in the beauty business. So I was, that was my goal, is to somehow get involved. I loved, you know, the singing, the arts, and the whole fashion industry. So I went as far as, you know, touring schools in LA, FITM, and all these things when I was still in high school.
Okay, wow.
Then after graduation, I ended up in beauty college, and I became a nail tech. So at 18, 19, I had my license. And back then, the business was thriving. And
what were you doing, manicures and pedicures?
Yes. And at 21, I opened up my own salon in Clovis and had eight technicians, tanning. It was a full-on service salon.
Wow.
But back then, I didn't have my daughter, and I didn't have any sort of, you know, obligation. I was just young and, you know, doing well, you know. And so when I had my daughter at 28, years later, I was like, okay, I got to do something a little more solid. I've got to make my foundation for her foundation, our foundation, solid. I need retirement. I need this. I need that.
Okay.
So by that time, I ended up in that business for maybe 12, 13 years, like I said, at 33. And it was about that time when she was 2 or 3 when I said, I need to make a career change, something. But I always loved school. You know, I always loved studying. It just didn't, the plan that I did just worked for me at the moment.
Were you enjoying what you were doing?
Absolutely.
Okay.
But my daughter came first.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's like, what's going to happen when I can't chase? When you're self-employed, you are chasing money. That's what you do.
You're preaching,
you chase money.
You're preaching to the choir right now, but
Okay.
Yeah.
You're chasing
You're
money.
hustling. You're grinding.
Yes, every single day.
Absolutely.
You wake up and, you know, you got to make sure, you know, especially when you have a child. So my mother said to me, you know, you need to call your cousin Mona because she's a CO at Pleasant Valley.
Okay.
And she's been there like 5 years. Just call her. You know, Cindy, I think you'd be good at it. You have that personality. I think you'll be good at it. And so I called her, and she just started me through the process. Her name is Mona Esparza, and she was like my, kind of like my little, she took me under her wing.
Mentor.
Yes, mentor, and guided me through the whole process as I was going through. So when I began to go through the process, that was in like 98,
okay.
99, okay? My daughter was born in 95. So yeah, 98, 99. I decided to take one class at City because I didn't do the high school and college like all my friends did.
Right.
They were like already graduated from Fresno State and doing their little thing. And I went to nail school and was just kind of, but doing well, just as well as they were,
Absolutely.
you know. But there was something missing that I needed I needed to have more substance and more experience to make things happen and be better, you know. So I took a class at Fresno City, and it was like Crim 5. It was like juvenile delinquency or something.
At that point, I know you said you had an artistic side to you. You loved arts, you loved beauty, but was there a adrenaline-seeking side to you still?
Yes.
Okay.
So I honestly was thinking about being a veterinarian because I love animals. But then I saw Berkeley, and I'm like, I'm not going all the way to Berkeley. That's a lot of work. So I took the class, and I did well, and I loved it. And so I'm like, you know, and I remember telling my parents, which they're both gone now, God bless them, R.I.P., but I told them, you know, I just don't see me going into a career without school. I've just never been like that.
Right.
I feel like you need to have all the, you know, the dynamics and the logistics, all that behind your career.
Now, was that based on you wanted to be prepared or because that was the social norm?
I wanted to be prepared.
Okay, that's good.
Yes. So I took the one class. I did well. That was 98 of fall. 99, I enrolled full-time and started the process of going through the department.
California Department of Corrections.
Yes.
Without the R.
CDC.
Okay.
Now, during that time, I was picked up as a intern at Fresno Adult Probation. And so they kept asking me to come back. Like I do a semester, they'd say, come back. So they gave me my office, I had my cards. I was literally a PO for the adult field, but I was handling like 3,000 cases of misdemeanor throughout the whole valley.
3,000?
3,000. 3,000 misdemeanor cases of I'm talking, you know, all.
Back then, were computers prevalent or was it all paperwork at that time?
There was a little bit of, there was a lot of paperwork.
A lot of paper, huh?
And so I did that for like a year and a half, and as I was going through the hiring process, the good thing was I learned a lot of casework. I learned how to read minute orders. I learned how to write reports to the court and write to the judges. I learned how to do so many things in that year and a half. So long story short, I ended up graduating, and I failed my first background because I had too many speeding tickets.
Oh, same. I failed CHPs because too many speeding tickets.
And so I remember my background investigator calling me and saying, Cynthia, you're a great candidate, but you got to get rid of these speeding tickets. And so why don't you just let these kind of
go away?
Yeah. And so with my mentality and the way I think, yeah, of course I was a little bit frustrated, but I was thinking, well, now I can just get school done.
Right.
And not be trying to do both, you know. So fast forward to when I hit the cow and all that. I was already done with City, getting ready. I did a semester at Fresno State. And
for the crowd out there, she was driving and she hit a cow.
I was driving, I hit a cow.
An actual cow, the animal.
A real cow, yes. So when I finally passed my PAT that day, I couldn't go to Corcoran because I'd already missed that day as a PI. So when they called me for Salinas Valley, they allowed me, surprisingly, to sit on it for a day. I said, can I think about this?
So they gave you an offer and you asked them for more time?
I asked them for one more day.
And what did they say?
They said, okay.
Okay.
There was only 9 slots left.
Wow.
So I got off the phone and I went on my computer and I looked at universities. I was thinking about school. Like I just registered, you know, I need to know if I can do school there.
Yeah.
And transfer my units. And I did. I got into CSUMB, which is California University of Monterey Bay. I went to the academy. Everything was all set. I had it all worked out. part-time at Salinas Valley, go to school, bring up my daughter, blah, blah, blah. Well, about 3 weeks into the academy, they walked in and said, all of you are full-time now.
Okay.
So it changed my whole plan.
Was it difficult for you attending that academy with a daughter?
No, because I had full support from her father and my parents.
Okay, that's a good thing.
And
but was it difficult in the sense of like
absolutely
missing,
absolutely,
and homesickness and separation?
4 months.
Oh, wow.
It was the 16 weeks at that time.
It was? In 2002, it was 16 weeks?
And so we made a big calendar board, and every time I'd come home, I put 16 weeks on there. We put something, and we do like a project or something, you know. And I had my manicure and stuff licensed. I still am licensed. So on our weekends, it was like, we're gonna paint your nails, do a pedicure, and
nice.
And so, but my plan was to take her up there as soon as I graduated or whatever, and figured out a place to stay. And back then, you know, everybody was rooming with everybody, and you know, I was older. I'm 36 years old. I wasn't going to be rooming with a bunch of youngsters.
Yeah, that's right. You mentioned you went to the academy at the age of 36.
I went to the academy at the age of 36. Absolutely.
Now,
and
do you feel that do you feel that attending the academy at that age was more beneficial than a young 21-year-old?
If I'm going to look at my life, because it's hard to like place that on every single individual, because I know a lot of 23-year-olds that are really, really smart and know how to do things, you know, who've done everything.
But for your situation,
but for my situation,
cool.
It was good. I would have never been that type to graduate and go to college. I would have got kicked out.
I feel you.
I was my mind, you know, I was like, let's hustle, let's get self-employed, make some money, and let's just move and roll, right?
Yeah.
So that worked for me, but you know, when you have a responsibility, you have to think long term, and it's not about you anymore. It's about that child. So, where was I at now? So
you were talking about that they walked into the class that you guys are all now full time,
and now we're full time. So in my mind, I'm like, oh no, I'm registered for school. What am I going to do? This is all now my whole plan, you know, because I really wanted to get through school. I'd already done 1 semester at state, so I'm like, I'm not leaving this open. I got to finish. Okay, so I ended up, I reported full time, but the blessing out of it was when I got to Salinas Valley, I ended up with weekends off and a job in education, Charlie Yard Education, GP.
HO4 education?
Charlie Education Level 4 education, 129 inmates. And right away when I got to the yard, I'd only been there like maybe a week. The sergeant approached me and he said, we have an officer who's going to, he got picked up to be, or he's going to do counseling time, acting time as a counselor. Would you like to fill in to be the education officer?
Okay.
And you know, behind him for 4 months. So I was only on like the yard for maybe, I don't know, a few weeks. And during those few weeks, you don't even know, Hector. I was like, Lord, why am I even here? I walked in that yard.
Before we jump into touching down at Salinas, it seems like you're very meticulous, goal-oriented, and do you not like curveballs? Like when they told you it's going to be full time, was it?
Well, yeah, because I already had it like, I'm very, very OCD, number one.
Okay, yeah, so like meticulous. That's a good thing though, like to be fixated on a goal. And so,
but I made it work.
Correct.
I made it work. I ended up doing 1 semester there.
Okay.
And I got like I was full time. I was full time at Salinas. I was full time in school, and I had my daughter up there by then.
No, you have good work ethic.
It was a juggle. I think back now and I'm like, how did I do it? But you know what? When it's meant to be and you're doing all the right things and you are making sacrifices and you are thinking about your family first, there's a way that the Lord just steps in and he
Absolute,
makes it
100%.
Yes. And so I had people really coming in and helping me like, hey, I know a babysitter in this part of town. So I would get up in the morning, drive my daughter to school, head down the 101, get to Salinas, get off. But you know what? it was a whole different, I loved going there. I loved it.
So Salinas Valley has always had the reputation of being extremely violent, rocking and rolling, busy. So you get there and you said you landed on Charlie Yard. From, you know what, I recently texted a friend recently. He's like, yeah, I started on Charlie Yard over there, level 4 GP 180. When you walked into a prison yard and you saw everybody in blue, what were you thinking?
Why was I there? I'm a female.
Really?
Why? Well, like, it was a mixed emotions. I was proud that I made it there, number
Okay.
one. I was flexing a little bit because,
Yeah.
like, hey, I'm a female, I'm here, I did it. I'm 36.
Right.
And not very many people at my age at that time would be able to handle all the different. But, you know, some of us are wired that way.
Correct.
And some of us, it's hard to, you can't become that. You're either that I believe in or you're not. I mean, some can grow to be into that. I don't know. I don't know how to explain it, but I'm always been very, very career-oriented and goal-oriented. So for me to take that leap.
But you're walking into a jungle now.
I know.
A concrete jungle. Were you very well aware of the possibilities that could happen?
Yes, I was. I was aware of it, but it didn't really. When it came face to face with it, it didn't intimidate me.
That's a
I
good
was
thing.
okay with it.
That's a
Yeah.
good thing.
Yeah.
Some people are built like that.
Yeah. My third day at Salinas, I was involved in a 128 Crip blood riot. And I saw two people who were shaking hands, going to the chow hall, stabbing each other on the way back. And it was just exactly how I said it. And it was like from here to that wall. And I was just like,
Was that on Charlie Yard?
yes. And they were coming back into my building.
Can you explain to us what are some of the things you hear or see during a giant melee like that, a riot? Sounds, pepper spray.
Back in those days, we had a lot more, we were able to utilize a lot more pyrotechnics. We had a lot more things also. We had triple chasers. We had all those different
Right.
bombs. And they took all that away from us. You know, they started
Yeah.
to take them, eliminate. By the time I got to SATF, we didn't have any of that. You know,
Yeah.
we had the 40 and the, you know, your mini and we hadn't like, we were still with the 38 revolver and all that.
Right.
But even the impact ammunitions, all that stuff was just changing. And so it was completely different than Salinas. Salinas, I felt like we had all the tools, but even they started to kind of pull those out when I left.
So let me ask you this. How important are use of force options as a correctional officer?
You have to know them like the back of your head. I still know mine.
Yeah.
I know my toolbox.
There you go.
And when you carry yourself with, like I said, you come in and you're smarter. I don't want to say you're smarter. There's a lot of, I have so many supervisors,
Right.
who didn't go to college, and they're freaking good cops. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm not saying that. But as a female, for me, this was going to bring out the best in me.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I forgot.
So right now you mentioned toolbox.
Okay,
I
yes, my
haven't heard
toolbox.
that in a minute. Can you explain to us what are some tools that would be in a correctional officer's toolbox?
Absolutely. So number one, it's going to be your command presence.
Oh my God, I already love where this is going.
Your command presence is so important because when an inmate or anyone sees you, it doesn't even matter if you're in your facility. You have a presence about you that is professional. You know how to talk, speak, and communicate with these inmates. You build a rapport. You are empathetic, not sympathetic. There's all these little things that you have to remember.
Facts.
They are not your friends. However, they are a human being, and you
Right.
have to show that their life is significant. You know, they're here, and our job is to make sure that not only that we're okay, but that they're okay,
Right.
and that it's safety and security for ourselves, the public, and the inmates.
Facts.
Between each other, all the way around, right? And so,
It's almost like a profession.
It's a profession.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think we've gotten away from that though, or the mindset.
Yeah.
It's a career. It's a profession.
Absolutely. And so when you walk in and your command presence is on point, and it allows them to look at you in actually a professional. They treat you different.
Correct.
They do, and they respect you different.
As opposed to being, wrinkly uniform,
Absolutely.
looking like a sack of shit. Excuse my French, but
Yeah.
They can tell.
They can tell. Your grooming standards is so important.
Right.
Yeah. So your command presence, and then of course your verbal judo, whatever they call it, your verbal communication, your verbal judo, however they change the vocabulary, to where you don't speak at a person, you speak to a person. And when you speak to a person, you have way more control of a situation, and you get a lot more better results than to start talking at them. And that even goes for between the COs and the administration, your superiors, because I've had
even at home, relationships, with your children.
So and me, and I'm a talker, and I like to say what I got to say. So sometimes I got to stop myself and go, you know what, that wasn't the correct way to come out to say that or to speak that. So by the time that I got into the department, I had my education, and I knew, a lot of penal code. I knew a lot, and I studied a lot of serial killers and did all that kind of stuff.
Like who? Like Jeffrey Dahmer?
My professor was at Fresno State was Professor Hickey and Dr. Scrappett, and they were like psych of crime professors who had been like my one professor, Dr. Scrappett, she was at Ted Bundy's execution in Florida. She was there, sat on it. So I just learned so much, and of course I love school, so I appreciated going through the forensics and learning all that stuff. So anyhow, back to the toolbox, the command presence, your verbal. And now, of course, we all know when that doesn't happen, when that fails.
Yep.
You start going into your use of force, like your upper,
right,
which is going to be your physical restraints. That would be next, I believe, if they're not going to obey, Right, your physical restraints. And then you go into the less lethal, and then you go into lethal. And however, our goal is to stay at the command presence and the judo, right? That our goal as an officer is to stay within those first two without escalating.
That's our goal, but it doesn't always work out that way.
But to de-escalate, right, that's what we're supposed to do.
Yeah.
So I just learned that me being consistent and the way I am right now, speaking, is the way I was in the prison. I was always very, very, I left all my stuff at home as much as I could.
Yeah.
And I always follow through with the things that I communicated with the inmates that I was going to do.
How important is that? How important is it if a correctional officer says something? How important is it that they stick to their word and or explain why it didn't happen?
It's your survival. It's your, because inmates do nothing all day except watch you.
Facts.
They know when you and your partners don't get along. They know when you're lazy.
Yep.
They know if you went out the night before and you're all hungover.
Yep.
They know if you're fighting with they know everything, And so when you can come in and be consistent, we all have bad days. And there's times when I would just blow up and say stuff, but you know what? They'd give me a pass. They're like, you know what? You go home and take a nap. We know
it's understandable.
Yeah. But it's very important to know all that stuff because that's what's going to save you. And I believe that the more consistent you are, it's like it spreads. It's contagious too. It can, like when I worked on Charlie Yard at SATF, I worked in the upper yard, GP level 4. I was the control booth officer for 3 years. I never used my weapon once because we had that building down so good. It was me, it was myself, Officer Magallone, who's a female, who had a lot of time, and Officer Reyna. They were my floor cops. And we had a very good work. We knew how to run that together. They taught me, though. I was new, and they taught me.
There's nothing better than when all three partners are on the same page, or even when all the watches are on the same page.
Yes. And it was just a good building. And then I finally bid out, and I went, I don't know, I was looking for different days off for school, I think, or something. And but as soon as we all left that building, it started going off. It started going off. Like,
it's funny how that works.
Bad, like really bad.
What would be some, I mean, for the newer correctional officers watching that do not know how to interact with an inmate or even carry themselves, if, let's say an inmate walked up to you and said, hey, Mrs. CO, when's the packages coming? Or when is, such and such, but you don't know the answer, what would be a good response?
I would probably just ask the inmate, what is your situation? Is it your package? Is it everybody's package? What's going on? If it's yours specifically, then I'll dig deeper to see what's happening. But if it's everybody's, then, because some of these inmates, they just want to get close to you and talk to you and ask you stuff.
Yeah. No, I'm glad you pointed that out too.
They already know the answer. They're just wanting to be, stupid. So
a thorn in your side, as I would say.
Yeah. And then you just, but I was always very, very, I wanted to go to work and just handle everything and go home and know that I did the best that I could do. And sometimes I would just be so burned out and disappointed because around you, you want people to be like you and work like you. And that doesn't happen.
Well, it's a big, giant agency.
Well, I'm talking about just like in your unit.
Right.
Because in the EOP units where I did my last 5 years, in the EOP unit at SATF, there's 6 officers that cover that unit. You have 4 EOP officers for clusters A, B, C, D, and then you have the control panel too. In each cluster, there's an office where each officer is supposed to sit and deal with their inmates. Well, guess what?
They all sit at one table.
Nobody wanted to sit out, and nobody would sit in their office. I think there was maybe my partner, Dallas Reyes, who I love, he would sit in. He retired about a year before me, but he had already done time, did military time, so he was done. Older man, like 60-something. He would sit in his office. And so the inmates would see that. They're like, you sit in your office with all of us in here with the grill gate shut and your door open. I said, that's because I have confidence that, I wasn't afraid to be in there.
Yeah.
And if one of them would...
Hey, guys, consider becoming a patron where you will get first exclusive dibs on the video before it airs to the public, and you'll get to ask the guest special questions that you have in mind. So that's also another way to support the channel. Thank you, guys. Appreciate all of you. Keep pushing forward. Make sure you hit that link in the description below.
And I'd be like, hey, sit down. Let's talk. What's going on? I've done, I'm like, all right, well, this is what we're going to do. And if it doesn't happen tomorrow or the next day, please remind me.
Yeah.
But they knew that I had been a counselor. I had acting time as a counselor.
Oh, you did? By the time you got to
times.
SATF. So before we jump to SATF,
Okay.
You mentioned EOPs. What are some of the differences you notice between GP inmates and EOP inmates?
Whining and crying. It's horrible. It's horrible. Especially the EOP inmates were not in our level of care. They should not have been in our level of care. Some of those inmates.
Should they have been in a higher level?
They should have been like at Atascadero, like at Ash. Absolutely.
So they were legitimately mentally unstable. And I say legitimately because I've seen a bunch of fakers in my time.
Yes, there were a lot of them that were pulling ruses and they were malingering.
And I'm not a doctor, but I know what malingering is.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Absolutely.
So these guys were off the rockers.
It was horrible. It got to the point towards my last year in that building to where I'd be walking, I don't know. Have you ever been to SATF?
Never.
Okay, it's huge. It's like a mile long. The prison, 7 yards.
7 yards?
It's A through F.
A through F is the design like a
And
like
it just
a
goes straight across.
straight across.
And they have 2 entrances with the administration way over here. So in order to get to your building,
Different parking lots or
yeah,
same parking
but
lot?
one entrance. So you got to drive all the way, pull in through the guard shack, show your ID, blah, 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 which they never did before until, I don't know,
Yeah.
all of a sudden. So then you drive all the way in, park. If you're going to be on this side, A, B, C, D, then you park on this parking lot. You know, there's West Gate and East Gate.
Okay.
And then once you get in your gate, you got to walk another quarter of a mile to get to your building. Well, I would hear the alarms going off already on Frank Yard, thinking, mother. I wouldn't even put my lunch bag down.
What did those alarms sound like? Like the police sirens or like the buzzing?
Boo.
Okay.
Now at Salinas Valley, there are different ones, so
Yeah.
you kind of knew where they came from by the way they chirped.
Yeah.
They're all the same at SATF, so you don't know where it's coming from.
Yeah.
Okay, so, but I already knew there was someone in the hold. When I heard that, I always knew there was going to be somebody, a suicide in a holding tank in program. So I would go in and I would just sign in and out and go, where am I taking this guy? It got to that point. I already knew I was going to be gone at TTA, somewhere on some...
Because an inmate was making suicidal allegations.
Yes. 3 a
Now-
day, at least 3 a day.
What year was this?
2000, right before I retired, 14, 15, 16.
Man, I feel like we missed a big giant gap though, because we went straight from Salinas Valley all the way to
Well, because
SATF.
SATF, remember I told you I was working in the control booth with my 2 partners.
Okay, so that was at SATF.
That's SATF, yeah, when I
Okay.
got to SATF, yes.
So when you got to SATF, did you experience a culture change or culture shock?
Absolutely.
What was some of that?
And I believe the reason why I kind of left out a lot of Salinas is because we were always locked down
Oof, yeah.
for like a year.
Yeah.
I'm talking locked down. Like you'd show up to work for 6 months. Okay, this is what happened with me. When they put me in education, I started searching. I found within 1 week, 8 weapons
Probably good ones too. Yeah.
in education. We were slammed one day. I started searching on my own. I'm like,
Wow. Where you find them? Just in common
oh,
areas?
no. Okay,
And just,
like there would be a poster on the wall,
okay.
and I'd be like, ooh, ooh. And then, you know, like the file cabinets
Yeah.
that have wheels, like in all the education rooms, they were putting them under there. So I was going under there, finding them. They were taping them up. So what they ended up doing is taking all the wheels off of everything, so it sat on the ground, and they couldn't put them under there anymore.
Oh, okay.
So I don't know if you're familiar with Hedgepeth. Captain
is that?
Hedgepeth. Captain Hedgepeth.
No.
He was my captain back then. Salaya, any of those guys? Okay. So they called me in and they were like, Villarreal, are you planning these weapons? Because you're finding a lot of them. I said, well,
So you were actually, disposing of them per departmental policy?
absolutely. I was writing a report. They made a book. Okay, this
I might have known somebody that would put them in his pocket and take them home and throw them away.
No. Do you know what they did after I kept finding them?
What's that?
They ended up doing a big, huge search. Because they were like, if all these weapons are here, they got to be all over everywhere else. They found 200. No,
Clearly.
they ended up finding 250 weapons.
Of course
and
they did.
I can guarantee you to this day, they made a binder, and I started it apparently
yeah.
with all my weapons, and it just kept going.
Of course they did. It's Salinas Valley.
250. So it got slammed for like a year, and then I left during that time.
Oh, shit.
That's why I'm saying that was pretty much, you know.
Let me ask you this. You're finding all these weapons. Are you thinking to yourself, like, God damn, this could possibly be used on me?
Absolutely. Yes.
Do you ever find any bone crushers? Big, giant steel.
We found some, yeah. Yes,
like
we
almost
found-
sword looking.
They were just like, and you know, I was new, I was young. You know,
Right.
I'm not young, but
you
I
were
was.
probably just an eager beaver, like crime fighter, like finding all this good stuff.
Well, I mean, you know, I was.
That's good.
So that was my experience there. And I loved our training because, okay, so back then we had bulldogs on, we had bulldogs on Delta Yard.
How was that?
Well, they got attacked by the whites. They were always getting jumped, and so they moved them. Nobody wanted them, so they moved them, and I guess they ended up at Pleasant Valley. I don't know.
Okay.
So, but back then, if I had anybody disrespect me, my partners, Salinas Valley partners, were the best.
Good. now we're going to talk about this. So you were a female, right? I know what it's like to be in a culture working as a correctional officer and having a female partner disrespected. Were you ever put in situations where you were disrespected and it was handled?
Absolutely. I don't know if it's okay for me to say this, but
just go ahead and say it, and I'll determine whether it's going to stick or not.
Okay, you got Bloods and Crips inside the facilities that they house together now because they've taken their stuff off the street. Back then, that's old news, but now they're in there. I've always told people that if I was gonna be a Blood or a Crip or be around them, I would be around a Blood. Crips have no structure. They have no sort of disciplinary within their within their gangs or their disruptive gang. They're not even a prison gang.
STG2 or some shit.
Yeah, they're STG2. And when it comes to, indecent exposure, being disrespectful to a female officer, calling you names, catcalling, just whatever you want to do. No one checks them. No one does anything. That was my experience. Now the Bloods, I got disrespected from a Blood on Charlie Yard. I want to say this was at SATF though, and I had a whole building full of Bloods, and the one disrespected me, and yeah.
He got dealt with accordingly.
He got dealt with, and
by his own people?
By his own people. All I know is it was my RDO when all that day happened. I remember, you always say something on the PA just because I was the control booth officer.
Yeah.
It was right there in my face in the shower.
Okay.
And, you say what you have to say. But nobody did nothing. Like, at Salinas Valley, had I reported that, they would have went and got him out of the shower.
Absolutely.
Naked. And probably cuffed him up and walked him across the yard naked on purpose so everybody knew what he did. But SATF wasn't like that. SATF was very like, they didn't really do anything. They came in, they talked to him, they put him in handcuffs. It was very, very peaceful, which is fine. At SATF, yes.
Did he go to the hole?
Well, this is what I remember. They took him out, and I went on my RDOs.
Yeah.
I had his counselor at that time call me and say, how do you feel about us bringing him back to the building or putting him in a different building? Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, it didn't even matter what I said because they had already taken care of him. Their own had already taken care.
Okay.
You see what I'm saying? So when I got back, I didn't know where he was, but then the inmate told me.
So the reason
I didn't really get into any much further than that because
no, that's cool, and I'm tracking. They're tracking too. Don't even trip.
Okay.
So the reason I bring it up is because when we started the department, indecent exposure or masturbation with indecent exposure was a shoeable offense. You go to ADSEC, you go to the hole, and now in beautiful 2025, they no longer go to the hole.
They do not. No.
As a female officer, former female officer, how do you feel about that policy change?
I've always felt that sort of behavior in front of me, to me, that is some sort of assault battery, whether it's mental. So I always told them, if I ever have anyone do that in front of me, I will spray them. And I don't care what you guys do. That is affecting me up here.
Right.
Whether he's putting hands on me. And it's just, it's just that low insult. Like, you can't get any lower than that to a female in a prison. It's just, you can call me every name in the book, but when you start doing that.
Right.
So they didn't really have any sort of repercussion, any sort of, they weren't doing anything. Write a report, write them up, Cynthia, write them up, Villarreal. Why? I mean, I'll write them up, but what are you going to, and it got so unsafe there. This was can I share with you my last experience there? And this is what made me finally leave. Okay. After I decided to leave the mental health yard on Frank Yard, I only had one more year left. I didn't know that at the time, though. Okay, my knee was already giving me problems. I'd already had a surgery, so I had planned on doing at least 20. I only ended up doing 17, but I planned on doing 20. But I had the age, right?
That's a good thing.
So I could have made my own decision, right?
Yeah.
So when I finally was done with the mental health, because I was starting to get my cholesterol, my blood pressure, it was all bad. I was drinking a lot. I was like, fucking yelling at everybody, fucking everyone at Burger King or wherever. Where's my fucking drink? I was all mad all the time. My daughter's like, you need to leave, Mom.
Now, was that your behavior? Was that your normal behavior?
No. I mean, not like, my normal behavior is a little quirky, but it's not like.
And did you not feel good? Was that conflicting with you?
Yes, absolutely. And it was conflicting with my family members and my friends. Like, they were like, Cindy, this is not you. You're usually very jovial, like, well, these mental health people. And I was up until those last 4 years. So I decided to bid out. And that was at the end of 2018. Yeah, 18. I did a year in Bravo 1, which is a level 2 GP. Dorms. Dorms. Not the gym, the dorm. You got the sections with the big grill gate that separates them. And there's bunks everywhere.
So is it a dorm setting or are they in cells?
The dorm setting. They're not in cells.
They're on bunk beds. Wow.
It's A section, B section, C section. And there's a big grill gate. There's 2 big grill gates that divide A and B and C and D.
Okay.
I mean, and B and C. And
how many per section? Approximately.
I can't really remember. Maybe 80. It was a lot. It's a big dorm. I mean, there's a lot of inmates in there.
Wow.
They're all over the place.
Gun coverage or no gun coverage?
No gun coverage.
It's level 2.
And so I've been in there first watch, thinking, no, because my partner Moreno, he was a really good cop, and he had time. Well, Mr. Moreno, when I got in there, decided to always do hospital coverage, so he was always getting redirected. So I was always getting stuck with the overtime.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, during this time, in those dorms, inmates tend to tin up. Because, and I don't, I really can't kind of blame them. I know it's dangerous for us and them.
Yeah.
But when you got like somebody with the fan on and they're whatever or yapping, they would do it for privacy. I get it, However, they're not supposed to be tenting up.
Correct.
But on first watch, I don't care if you're tenting up because I'm not going to pull your tent down at 2 a.m. and startle you when I got a bunch of inmates just there sleeping, and you have to walk all the way back with the flashlight.
During count?
Yes, and then you have another officer downstairs, and your gates, that you've popped the fire doors, and you go through together, you're making sure, and you got to shut that big gate.
That sounds sketchy.
It's very sketchy. So I had when I was only in there for a year, and I had a supervisor who would come in and say, you have got to rip down. You've got to stop those. You gotta take the tents down.
Was this a newly promoted supervisor or somebody with some experience?
Just a female.
Okay.
And as a female, it just wasn't safe. I felt the unsafeness.
Right.
You know what I mean? I felt it. So let's get back to the indecent exposure. My last probably 2 weeks in there, I did a count. It was like my 3 o'clock count or whatever. And I would always take the top just because that was my building. And I would allow my overtime to do the bottom. It's easier, and especially if it was a female. Like, you go ahead and take the bottom. I'll take the top. I got back to the very back of the of A section. And there's like 4 or 5 rows of bunks, so it's way in the back. It's dark.
Damn.
And I went to flash my light on, and there was this black dude masturbating. And I'm talking, we're closer than me and you are. And he's completely naked. And I didn't react. I was just, in my mind, I was like, I can say something and I can get jumped right here in the corner.
Yeah, it's a fucked up spot to be in.
Or I can be safely, remove myself from the situation, continue counting, and then figure out what I'm going to do when I get, this done. So I wrote him up. And in the morning, when we did the shift change, I told my second watch partners, and I told my clerk, because he was my clerk, and he was a really good clerk, black man, and he did everything, and I shared with him, and I think that he had a talk with them, but I had already decided to leave. But situations like that I believe that supervisors just get so complacent. Well, everyone can get complacent at any time, but you start to forget that these inmates can hurt you,
I'm pretty sure she knew what she was asking of you. There's some fucking supervisors just assholes. I'm not saying that person is.
Well, okay.
But I've seen examples. You know what I mean? I've seen instances where they're doing too much.
Just stay in your office and let me do my job. And I was a good cop because I did enough training and education that where I would block the inmates. Let me talk to the sergeant. No, you talk to me. I probably know more than your sergeant.
Right.
So tell me what you need. Well, I have milestones. I need this. I need that. I said, I'll take care of it. I can find that out for you. Let me just run your number and I'll do it because I can look up everything. And so that little bit of knowledge that I took from probation, school, counseling, being raised with a lot of heart and like, you know what, Cindy? And my mom was like that, don't come home from school if you're bullied and get beat up because you need to go back and beat them up. You need to go and I was raised kind of like, like that. And we're Portuguese. My mom's full-blooded Portuguese, and we just have kind of like that in our blood, right? So as well as my cousins who were I had 3 at Kalinga. There's only 1 left now, but the 2 that were there first, Mona, Esparza, and Lydia, they were really, really like helpful. If I got myself in a situation, like, I call them, what do you do? And what do I do? And so, then as you got closer to having more time, then you really start seeing all the stuff. Like, I remember during block training at Salinas Valley, they said, don't you dare even try to promote until you got at least 7 years in. You don't know nothing yet.
Yeah.
Then I get to SATF and they're like, 2-year cops.
Yeah.
I'm like, who brought their son to work? Who is this guy? He looks like he just rolled, like he's 12. And they're like becoming sergeants. And then they end up on your yard and you're trying to run your building and they're in there running. They don't know how to do it.
They're becoming wardens. They're becoming associate directors. Mm-hmm. After 2-year promotion, 2-year promotion, 2-year promotion, never worked the line. And now they're trying to tell people what to do.
No, you can't. I don't see how anybody would even want to have a job at that without working the line. I don't know.
Ego.
Status.
I'm better than you mentality, or I think I'm better than you mentality.
Mm-hmm. Because like Ron Davis, when I was at Salinas, he was there. He had just left there when I got there. Then he came to SATF. It's like I kind of, I didn't really know him that well at Salinas. I don't think I really knew him at all, but I know that when he came to SATF, he didn't have that much time, and he was a transportation sergeant. And then he just kept going higher. And then he married my really good friend.
He did? You just mentioned Ron Davis, and my blood pressure just literally spiked up. I hope my workman's comp doctor is watching that. But that just goes to show you like how this job affects you. Like you mentioned Ron Davis, and I like fucking twitched. But because I had an interaction with him while I was a lieutenant at Donovan. Mm-hmm. And one thing he said was, we are no longer able to put inmates in handcuffs if they tell us they don't want to be put in handcuffs.
Okay. So my question is, I see when I left the department, there was probably like, my gosh, I'm not even like 10 officers' kids that were rolling up. And I'm like, why would you want your child to work here? Or why would you even encourage? I don't know. And at this time, now, I'm not saying 10, 15, I'm not saying years ago, but now, I don't.
So in your career, beginning in 2002 at Salinas Valley State Prison, what changes did you see within the department? Which direction did the department go?
It went to being a little more inmate friendly. or trying to make that R really stick. And I found that when I worked in probation, by dealing with just the misdemeanors and learning the casework and seeing, the files and the recidivism on like a child molester, or rehabilitation for a child, there is none.
Correct.
There isn't, because
45 caliber, but yeah.
I mean, people are like, well, do this and do that. No, because it's up here.
Absolutely.
It's not down. It's not anywhere. It's here. So until you can get this out, so
it's like a sick dog that you have to put down.
Yeah, and so, but I did start finding that the harder you worked, it didn't even matter anymore. It really didn't matter.
No. The more work that you did, the more you got rewarded with hard work.
Yeah. I was having captains come up to me and ask me how I should redo the inmate program because I was a senior. Everybody bid out. I was the only senior cop in there left towards the end. And so I was pretty much running that whole building by myself. I mean, as far as the EOPs, med lines, chow run, property, where's my books, where's my this, where's my KOPs, where's this? It was just.
At what point in your career did you realize that you knew more than some of your managers and supervisors?
I think at that time, during those you pick up on little things here and there along the way, but
yeah, you do.
Because like when I was a counselor and I was reading reports, I'm like, this person doesn't know how to spell.
Yeah,
Like there's supposed to be a period right here, and you're not supposed to say I. You're supposed to say. You're not supposed to use slang when you write a report.
Correct.
You're supposed to speak, and write block letters. You write. I don't know. I took report writing in college, so I would read these reports and I'm like, they sound like they're just talking. They're just, But they would never pick me up as a counselor. But they sure wanted me when it was time to.
Let's talk about that.
When
did you begin acting as a counselor?
When I didn't act at, now, let me just hold on really quick, rewind. If I would have stayed at Salinas, I came home because of my daughter, because she missed her dad. And, they were such a great support. So I came home and I thought, you know what, I'll finish at Fresno State, which I did. So that was the reason I came back, just to let you know. That was what started it, and then I followed. I don't remember where I was. I'm sorry, I'm like all over the place.
I had asked you, when did you begin acting? You said you went to SATF.
When I went, okay. If I was at Salinas, I'd probably be a higher up. They really liked me there, but I came, to be a counselor there and to be involved at that time was amazing. We had a great, I think his name was Lamarck. He was our warden. Lamarck. But we would come in like on Thanksgiving and holidays, and he would do like at every entrance. Well, there was only Salinas, a smaller prison. He'd have like a whole Thanksgiving meal for us, and I'm not talking like cheap, catered.
Yeah, that's what's up.
Catered for all of us who had to work. It was good, I don't know. It was just a good place to work. Did you
enjoy going to work?
I loved working at Salinas. I was bummed when I came home, and I knew I could have promoted there a lot more. But when I got to SATF, it was a whole different thing, and I started to get discouraged. I started to get disappointed because they had their own little, whatever going on over there. And then when they found out you were from Salinas, they would look at us like...
That's what I was going to say.
They thought we were all know-it-alls.
Were they fond of outsiders? Or meaning people that transferred in from other institutions?
They were, but they would... Because my group had a lot of officers on that transfer from Pelican Bay. We had some Pelican Bay, Salinas Valley.
That touched down at SATF?
Yes. When that group came in to transfer, there was Pelican Bay, Salinas. It was all these people that came down that from prisons like that, and we were like, what is going on here?
And I'm sure you guys and the Pelican Bay guys were like, man.
This is for Disneyland. I don't remember, somebody was on their phone. I was a control booth officer on Charlie Yard. and this is before I became a permanent. This is when I was bouncing around, at SATF.
Okay.
Because remember, I was at SATF for a little bit. Then I went into the Charlie 6 control.
Yeah.
For my first bid. But during that other time, I was kind of bouncing around. And, it was.
No, I understand, because there's a lot of people that go from Centinela and Calipat, they go to RJD, Donovan, and it's oh my God. They realize they made a mistake instantly.
Some guy wouldn't get off the phone, and at Salinas Valley, I just shut down the whole program. I go, get off the phone. I shut the phone off and tell everyone to lock it up, and no one would care. And we're like chilling for the rest of the day. I tried to do that at SATF, and I got yelled at. I go, lock it up, and everybody's like, lock it up? And I go, lock it up, get off the phone, and all you lock it up. And I start opening door, and they were like, what is this chick doing up here? And I'm like, go home.
They start looking at you like you're the problem. We don't do that here.
So they call me, and they're like, we don't do that here. And I'm like, well, we did it over there, and I'm going to do it here because this guy wasn't listening to me. Yeah.
It's hard. It's hard because it's conflicting. It's like, hey, fuck, I guess I got to go along with this program, but I know what the right thing to do is, but fuck, I'm here.
Yeah. So, and around that time, as I was back at Fresno State, so I was doing all my, and it was kind of cool because I was always been really interested in gangs and, and all that kind of stuff. So, I would kind of pick their brain, and they liked it because they knew that I was in school, the inmates, and I would, kind of question them about certain things. And if I was doing like a research in paper or something like that, I would question them and pick their brain and get like real answers, And so I did well in school because I was already like in the department.
Yeah.
And it helped both angles of my career.
So when you first started your career, all the gang leaders, Mexican Mafia members, Nuestra Familia, AB, they were all in the shoe.
Mm-hmm.
Were you there at SATF? Did any members land at that institution? That you're aware of?
Yeah, Popeye.
Popeye was there when you were there?
But he got taken care of a while back. Yeah, he was running stuff, and then we got somebody else that came on BR when I was telling you when I was on that BR that one year.
Yeah.
I can't remember his name though. Who kind of showed up, and then Popeye ended up getting.
Yeah.
He was done with like a couple years ago, I think, or whatever.
Did you notice a change in the inmates? Did you notice an inmate change in their behavior when the laws started to change? AB 109, Prop 57, lifers started going home. Did you notice a difference in the violence or?
Well, I noticed that because I was counseling at that time.
Okay.
And, when you've been celled up in your own little private room with another cellie or single cell, which that was another thing. At Salinas Valley, you had to beg for a single cell. We didn't just single cell you because you were like,
Right.
But then you get to SATF, and I'm like, I want a single cell because somebody's talking to me at night. I don't know who it is because I'm hearing voices. Okay, you can be single cell. I'm like, what?
I don't think it was just SATF though. I think during that time frame, the state was already changing statewide. Everything you're talking about was already starting to be happening at other institutions as well.
Yeah.
Is what I'm starting to believe.
Yeah.
Now, some institutions are more wild than others, like Donovan is fucking doing their own thing. But you're right. I hear what you're saying.
And it made it really hard for counselors because when they did that whole 109 realignment, like I said, when you're in a cell with your other buddy or whatever, and you've been there for a while, and now they changed the points, and now you're a level 2, and now you got to go to a dorm. Oh no, I'm gonna go get in trouble. I'm staying right here on the yard, is what they're thinking. You understand what I'm saying?
100%.
So you're pulling your hair out as a counselor because you can't catch up, because every time that you have to send them to the hole, you got to reintegrate them into the yard with the committee. It's like it was a committee every time something happened, right?
So what directions or instructions were you given as far as reducing these individuals' points?
Well, I was acting, so I had to, when you told them that their points are down, they had to move, like I said, they would end up catching an RVR to bring their points back up so they could stay. Now, the full-on spectrum of it, I was only acting, so I ended up, leaving and then going back to the line. But I don't know if that was for me. I love not being on the line sometimes, just to have your weekends off and all that. But
Did the casework seem like a lot, overwhelming?
Oh, absolutely. Because you would get a, what's it called? You'd get a revision of the revision.
Yeah, a clarification of the clarification, yeah.
And then once you got the revision down, they got another revision. I'm like, what? So you're doing all, and I'm talking about like, what was like the six, what are the 6 elements of a VIO? Like the 6 elements of a VIO.
Yeah.
Okay. And then they added 2 more. So you had to like go back and go through all the cases and see if they qualified for this and that on the VIO. I don't remember quite, so I can't like be specific. I just remember that there was 6 elements to a VIO, and then they added the 2. Now I don't know if that's still the way. It was 8 when I was counseling. Then they took the 2 away again. There was just all these things that you'd open up your email after just doing all these cases because you had 14 days to get them to committee. And now you gotta go do this.
With your experience and knowledge, was the stuff they were asking you to do, was it making sense?
No. I was trying to figure out who was making all these decisions and how they would even know that they would work if they'd never even been on the line before. How do you even know? Yeah. How do you? What? Yeah. How do you know this if you've never been?
As you're working, are you thinking to yourself like, what is like? Are you thinking this doesn't make sense? Is this?
Yeah, it doesn't make sense. You know, inmates. I had one experience on Delta Yard it's a Delta Yard level 4 SNY where I was counseling over there, and they found some escape paraphernalia.
Okay.
In the old clothes where they used to steam the clothes and shine them all back there in Boke somewhere. They found a rope and a bucket, all kinds of stuff by PIA or by the PIA, the central kitchen. So they had to shut everything down. And there's a lot of inmates that work at Central Kitchen to find out where that paraphernalia escape stuff was. They found all kinds of stuff, so they shut everything down. And the inmates were mad because they need to go to work, okay? So we had to go through, the CC2 said, okay, we got to each take all these files, and we need to go over through all of them, and we're going to change the requirements to be behind the wall.
No freaking way.
You no longer can do this and this. So all these inmates were complaining to go to work, but then when we changed all the different requirements to be able to go behind the wall, a lot of them couldn't work behind the wall, right? It kind of cleaned up. Okay, so when we got that taken care of, we finally let the ones that were whining go back to work. Well, now they're having to work like 3 times as hard because there's nobody else back there because everybody got fired. So now they weren't going to work. It was just
wow,
one thing after another. So and so we had to hire new people and put them through it was a lot. I felt like I spent most of the time just trying to take one tiny little step forward.
Now,
one little.
The reason for you acting, were you aspiring to promote, or did you just want the experience?
I wanted the experience, and I think I might have wanted to promote, but towards the end, it didn't really even matter. No. Mm-mm. And honestly, I think it had a lot to do with my age. I'm no nonsense. I ain't got time for all that stuff anymore. If I would have been a little freaking whippersnapper, came in at 25 and yeah, maybe, but at 36 and
because
40,
were you observing what the BS that the supervisors were dealing with?
Yes.
And you're like, nah, I don't want to inherit that mess, that headache. You weren't wrong.
Mm-mm.
It's like babysitting.
Yeah,
grown people.
Yeah. So, it's just, but I took everything I learned, and when I left, it's like, I got to like make something good come out of this, But I will tell you that when I left, everybody around me was so happy. My family, my friends, my daughter, they were just like, we're so glad that you're out of there.
Were you ready to leave?
I was ready. I had an option, and I chose to leave because I kept thinking, if I can get out of here while I still have a little bit of respect for the department and I can, can like, do something else because I still have a lot of like, things that I want to do. I think I should just leave now. So I took the option to leave. And then went back into the beauty business. But that's when I fell into all that issues with my money and with the state owing me all the money that they do and all the penalties, and Adam and Ferone, and who got fired.
Who did?
Adam and Ferone. I fired Adam and Ferone. They didn't do anything for me. And I ended up firing them and winning pretty much after I left them. I represented myself.
That's good.
Yes. I had more knowledge because Adam and Ferone has an assistant, a paralegal, and then they have an assistant who has an assistant who has an assistant. By the time you get to the assistant, the last one, nobody knows what your case is really about anymore. And I was getting crazy letters like, when is your surgery? I'm like, it was a year ago.
Damn.
And so I ended up, but I did it the right way. I went down to WCAB and I filed all my paperwork on Adam and Ferone, state fund. I wrote it to the judge. Everybody got a letter. They were late on all of my vouchers, my workman's comp adjuster from state fund. She just dropped the ball.
How long was that process? Was it a lengthy? A year and a half?
And when I finally one morning I woke up and I said, this is ridiculous. I should already be back in school. I should have already graduated from going back to school. Another whole other career, going back to school. I started researching stuff and I'm like, wait a second. There's penalty fees for late vouchers. There's penalty fees for late money. There's penalty fees. So I'm like, why hasn't anyone called me? Why is Adam Ferone? Everyone kept dropping the ball on me. So finally I picked up the phone one day and I called State Fund and I said, I need this person's supervisor. And Lord and behold, within like an hour, somebody called me. And I kind of explained my situation and she was like, Cynthia, something doesn't look right here. Let me look through your file and I'll get back to you. I said, okay. So within like an hour, she called me back. She's like, did you ever get a check for this amount of money? And I said, nope. Have you gotten your vouchers? Nope. Have you? No. Nope. So within 1 week, I had my vouchers.
Damn.
I had one of my checks.
Yeah.
And then I started to dig, and I told her, I said, do you know that you owe me penalties on top of all this? And she's like, I've never heard of that. I said, well, you're a supervisor. You need to go figure it out. So just last week, they were holding on to it. I got a call last year. I ended up getting that first money, the settlement that she forgot to pay me.
Yeah.
I ended up firing Adam and Ferone. I ended up getting that money. Then I ended up getting my vouchers, but they held my money for my penalties for everything. So I finally reminded them 2 weeks ago, and they still owe me that big amount that I guess there's no money. So everyone who's waiting for a CNR, they're not doing CNRs. They don't really have to.
Yeah.
But they like to get us out of their hair. You know what I mean? But they haven't done that yet. But they had already approved mine. So I don't know what's going to happen with that. But as of last week, I was able to clear all my voucher penalties and all that.
Well, that's good.
And I said, you need to get on this because I'm going to end up going back and getting you guys for another 2 years on the vouchers. I'm already done with school. I'm already licensed, state licensed. I'm ready to open a spa.
Yeah.
And you guys haven't even paid me. So, and I said, and may I remind you that Bernice, who was my original caseworker who dropped the ball, because they ended up transferring me to another one who finally started figuring things out, she told me, do you know, Cynthia, that 87% of these vouchers that we give out when people retire, they don't even use them. I said, well, I'm not a lazy ass, so I'm going to use mine, and I need it. Yeah. I need that money. I ended up getting like, I don't know, 18 grand.
Damn.
So I only used half of it for school because it didn't cost all that, right? So because that voucher's pending, and I'm schooled out.
Yeah.
There's no more school I can do. And I'm going to be 60. I don't want to go to school anymore. I'm tired. I want to go to school. So I said, why don't you use that voucher and just give it to me?
Yeah.
Because you already owe me all that other money, and since we don't know when in cyberspace is going to show up or whoever has it, or when governor whatever, you know, why don't you just help me out and give it to me? Can you guys just help me out? Come on. Just, and they did.
They did? Well, that's a good thing.
Yes. So they did, because I know more than them, because I do my homework. And Rose goes, you're really, really, really hard to deal with. I said, I'm going to get really a lot harder. I said, so you better start figuring out what you're doing. I said, because I'm telling you what to do.
Yeah.
You know? And when I wrote Adam and Ferone the letter, and I said, I want all of the hours that you put into my case itemized. And I want to know every hour that you did. And I want to know how much it is so that I know not to pay you. Not to pay you. And they wrote me back and said, you don't owe us anything. They didn't even explain. They were just like, wow, we screwed up. We're done. So yeah.
After you retired, even though you faced this inconvenience with getting paid, like, how do you feel overall?
I feel like I did exactly what I needed to do, because
nice.
I'm glad they put me through that, because I can now, if anyone ever said, hey, I'm getting, having issues with because Adam's they're the ones who represent CDCR, it seems like.
Yeah.
You can do it on your own. You don't need them. If you can actually do your footwork, you don't need them.
Represent yourself?
Yes. I represented myself. I will never use an attorney again.
Really?
Absolutely not. I learned so much that I can literally walk myself through a case, and that's how I got this money this last week. They're like, we're not going to deal with Cynthia anymore. She's smarter than us. Here's your check. Get out of here. Yeah.
Now, do you think it's incompetence on the other person's? Do you think they don't care, or they don't know, or they're just incompetent?
Well, do you know when President Trump and Elon sent out that letter?
Yeah.
What have you done in the last week? That's the letter they need to be getting. I told him. I told the work comp person last week. I said, this is why they're sending out letters, because of people like you who don't do their job.
Yeah.
And, I said, I did all the footwork on my case. That is why that letter's going out. It wasn't to, it was an honest question. And I can name a lot of people who need that letter.
No, there's a lot of people stuck in that workman's comp process. A lot. Thousands stuck like Chuck. No answers, no money, nothing.
But you know what? When I handled 3,000 cases of misdemeanor in Fresno, when I didn't even know anything yet,
yeah,
and I got through a lot of those cases, and I was in school and had a daughter. You can't do your full-time job and get through. Because one of the caseworkers was like, I have so many cases. I have like 70. And I'm like, oh, God. Well, you better freaking take,
With that being said, and all your wisdom, do you have any hope for our future?
In CDCR?
No, in the United States of America as a country.
Absolutely. I always have hope. I do. I have hope. But I believe that the kids of today, if they don't have a solid figure in their life that has a good head on their shoulders to guide them, they're not going to make it, because you can't spend your life behind a computer. You can't spend your life in doing homeschooling all your life. I mean, I believe that some people need all that, but everything is just
tech is huge and important.
Yes, it is.
But so is verbally communicating with people physically.
Mm-hmm. And being in your child's life,
children's life,
and I don't mean being there as they grow, as they maybe have hard times, roadblocks, all this stuff, But as far as where we're going, I always question, should my daughter have a child? Should she get married and have kids? What's the world going to be like? But then you can't.
You recommend your daughter become a correctional officer
No.
in California?
Absolutely not.
Why not?
Because it's dangerous. It's dangerous right now. And it's going to get more dangerous unless somebody steps in and cleans up this, you're my buddy, you're my homie, let me shake your hand and let's go freaking to the snack bar. And yeah, no fist bumping, air hugging, no. You know, you build that rapport sometimes with an inmate because you do. I mean, there's some people out there, you can't help it. They have that personality, and I will say that there is some that do come out and they're rehab. I'm not going to say that there's not. There is.
Facts. But what we're speaking about is the extra BS that they got going on.
Yeah. But you don't go in there thinking that. You go in to be an officer and you're custody.
Correct.
You're not a teacher. You're not a mental health.
A rec therapist, a psychiatrist, none of that.
None of that. They sent me to EOP school for a week in Visalia
They did?
to learn about all these crazy people
How
within
was
a
that?
week.
As an officer?
Yes. To work in the EOP building.
This is the first time I ever heard of a course like that.
It was like a substance abuse facility. It was for EOP. No, but it was to work in those units.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Is there anything we haven't touched on yet that you would like to touch on? We covered Salinas, SATF. Is there anything we left out? Any advice you would give to a female correctional officer that has maybe 1 year in the department? Now? 2 years? Just graduated?
I would just say to go in there with your professionalism. If you can actually get involved and do some acting time as you get more experience, but try to find someone in the department who is solid and you can trust, because there is, there's good supervisors that will help you out and, take care of you. Like I was saying,
accommodate.
yeah, like at Salinas Valley, we were talking about some of the people that I knew there.
Solid dude, yeah, I know.
Solid, Bracamane, Stacker,
Yep.
Spore, and just by watching them, you knew exactly you're an officer.
Yeah.
You were an officer, and that's what I went in to be. No therapist and no coddle, no. But as a female, remain professional.
Yeah.
Don't go in there with a bunch of makeup on. Don't go in there acting like you're going to a night out, because these are inmates.
Can you say that again, please?
Do not go into the prison looking like, you're going out and you are trying to impress someone or get recognized, because you will get it and it's not going to be good. And the thing about that is, I think I went through my whole career. Nobody really knew anything about me when I went to the prison. Nobody knew anything. My hair was in a bun. I wore no makeup. My personality was the same, but I was just very, I would save that for the outside. But in the inside, you conduct yourself with professionalism. And if you're consistent, the inmates will continue to take you serious, and they know not to mess with you.
That's huge.
And stay physically in shape. Go to the gym. If an inmate sees you, they're not gonna mess with you if you're all freaking, if you're looking good and you're polished.
Yeah.
Versus the one that comes in, all just sloppy.
A lot of female correctional officers are mothers or expecting mothers. What advice would you give to balance the job and motherhood?
To balance the job and motherhood, just don't bring your work home, because your kids will feel it. Even if they're little, they feel it. They see the change. And if you have a support system, take advantage of it, because you're going to need it. You're going to need it when they're little, they're little. But as they get older and they start knowing what you're doing, what you're about, and then, you come home, you've had a bad day, or you take it out on your significant other or your kids, and next thing you know, you're telling your kids not to go to your room, but to lock it up. And you're like, wait a minute, I didn't mean to say that.
Oh, my dad told me that one time.
You know what I mean? And you're like, oh,
Yeah.
I didn't mean to do that. You really have to pay attention. But you also have to have another life. Okay. This is very important. there's a lot of officers that this is their whole life. This is all they've ever done.
Correct.
If you have to have other hobbies, I mean, what do? Do you play guitar? Do you sing? Do you snowboard?
Do nails?
Do you whatever you do it and keep doing it, and don't lose all those contacts. You know, don't lose your friends.
Right.
My friends are all from grammar school.
Nice.
They're grammar school, high school. We're all and I can always go back to them. My friends. And even though my parents are gone, I have my daughter now. She's in L.A. But as a mom, to be in this position, as you get older, your kids kind of, like my daughter was really like resentful, like for a while, because I was, a different person kind of, and a little bit more harsh. And
it's understandable.
But
normal.
as they get older, they do have a respect for you. Like, Mom, like now she's older. Now that she's older, she's like, Mom, you don't have to do anything more. You've done it all. What is staying 3 more years going to do for you?
Absolutely.
You've already done the work. You've already done it.
Exactly.
So just bounce and do what you love. And I did.
I'm glad you did.
So I went back and I got my esthetician degree. I got licensed, went back to the beauty business.
Nice.
To what I did before. And now I'm in the chemistry program to get my certification so I can formulate and kind of just take that to the next level. I'm always going to be like,
you're killing it. That's good.
So
grinding.
I am a happy, genuinely a happy person. I'm positive, and I take the time I'm the type that I'll start a conversation with my Uber driver or like the gal when I was leaving right now. She's like, where are you going all dressed up? Because yesterday I was shot out. Came off the plane. I was like, someone hit me with the freaking Mac Peterbilt. And I said, I'm going to do a podcast. And then I kind of gave her a little bit.
Yeah.
And she's like, when you come back, I'm in criminal justice right now.
Oh, nice.
She goes, so please, and when you come back, she's the little attendant. So tonight, when I go back, we're going to chat, and she wants to know about how the do's and don'ts to be a cop or an officer. So, yeah, absolutely.
Awesome.
And then when they see me, they're like, you don't look like you would be a cop. I said, because it doesn't, I'm not. I'm Cindy. I am who I am, and I'm not going to let it, I see so many officers go in, even female, and they come out all tatted, and and I'm like, why?
That's the latest trend now.
But
generational thing.
But you see it big in the prison, and it's just I'm talking about in the prison.
They're blasted.
No, I'm talking about prison. I'm talking about seeing beautiful women that go in the prison, and then they're just they come out looking like an inmate, and I'm like,
I mean, we see it. We do see it for sure, 100%.
It is what it is, but
yeah. I mean, same thing. They carry backpacks now, when we used to carry lunch boxes in. Mm-hmm. This is the whole generational. It's interesting to watch, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm. but overall, I loved. There's always nothing's free. Nothing's free. I can, like my knee. I have like a little bit, and it's very, very hard for me because I always did all my, my modeling stuff and my competitions and all that. And for my knee to have a big old scar, that was very, very like hard for me to watch, But I got my family. I got a nice, happy life.
Priceless.
Me and my daughter are just like, That's awesome. I'm not like, my OCD is, I see a therapist though. I see 2. And they keep me in check.
That's awesome. Mm-hmm. That's good.
He'll be like, what did you do this week? I said, I had a bunch of stuff to do. And I said, fuck it.
Yeah.
And he's all, you're very candid, Cynthia. I said, my last therapist, I was a little more appropriate. I said, this time you're a man. I'm going to just say what I have to say. I said, you just have to get a case of just forget it, And so he would just kind of like, and I'm done with him now. I actually finished my very last session with him like a couple of weeks ago, but I still see my psychiatrist. I have to.
No, I hear you.
And I'm all for it.
Absolutely. I encourage it.
And I'll be honest, in the Lord, he's the one that every day I would walk in all the way to work, all the way driving. Lord, you got this. I wouldn't even be here if it wasn't for you. So because this is your plan for me, I know you got me. So whatever I need to do, you just speak to me, you know, and I'll try to hear you amongst all the stuff. So even through my drinking, even through my health issues that I had because of the drinking and because of the stress, got me through it.
I'm glad.
And I feel better. I look better. I run into people that are like, Cynthia, you look so much.
You look great.
Better than you were just. And I said, thank you, because it was really tearing me apart. So these new officers are going to have to do 50 or 37 years.
That's impossible.
I told every officer that I was able to speak to before I left. You're young. You're 23, 24. If you have a chance somewhere in between there to go get a degree or go do something else, do enough time in here to get you started and go out and do something else. You don't want to be 57 in here at 24. I said, no, you're going to end up having a really dysfunctional relationships, kids, everything. You have to
the health alone,
yes, and your
mental health.
And your mental health. And don't get fixated on that overtime.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one.
Because when you're only 24 and you are just burning, you want to buy a house so bad that you're doing 30 overtimes, and then you get it, and then now your next thing is you want a Harley, and then you want a quad. And I said, you're going to be 35, 40, and you're going to be so burned out that you're not going to be able to finish, and it will. And then when you do finish, that adrenaline that's been like this
fucking
for
heart
20
attack.
years.
Instant heart attack.
They say it takes 2 years for your adrenaline to come down.
Mm-hmm.
And when it comes down and your body's not moving and you're not
shut down,
you will shut down, and that's when you start all the ailments and all.
Oh, we see it. We've seen it over and over.
I wake up and I'm like,
yeah.
So, and about that shaking that hand thing, would you say so? So this is my fear about that. This is what I was thinking. An officer who is trained like that is sincere. They're going in to shake a hand sincerely, right? The inmate's not thinking that.
I'm glad you said that.
He's thinking I got this guy.
Absolutely.
So aren't they thinking like that?
No, they're corrupt and criminals and demonic. I've come to that conclusion.
Because
I've sat at the table with them. I was a PIO, so I know how these people operate. It's evil.
So that's not good. And I don't really know what to say, because I would just avoid that whole, just go do something else.
Well,
I don't know.
I'm glad you've made the trip out here. Really am.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your story. I hope your daughter watches and realizes how much of a hardworking mother she has.
Thank you.
And all the effort you put in to provide for the family. I commend that, truly.
Thank you.
Yep. So there you guys have it. Something different, much needed. Glad to hear that perspective. If you like what you saw, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Love you guys. Keep pushing forward.
Unhinged line, Hector's legend engraved. Living life raw, never been tamed. From the hood to the pen, truth and tales pen. Hector Bravo unhinged, story never ends.